Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Tech Talk. What we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of a problem that a lot of us have in the industry, and that's understanding what optioneering is, but more of the problem that we have a lot of times based on the tools that we use to design. When we're doing the concept, especially conceptual and some of the design functions that we do as part of our daily workflow, we have a problem with being able to look at enough options to really make sure we're looking at the best thing and delivering the best design for a client. So we're going to talk a little bit today and show how by using a tool like SITEOPS, we're actually able to go in and not look at a few options, but look at sometimes up to millions of options for a project. Quick agenda. We're going to look at what is optioneering. I think everybody needs to understand what we're talking about, especially if you haven't heard that term before. What we want, power of optioneering, which I'm going to go in and actually show you some things that you can do in SITEOPS. We're going to go in and look at how and just a simple little change may make a huge revision to a project and a huge cost difference, plus or minus. Don't don't believe it, try it, and then we'll go into questions at the end. So as previously said, ask all the questions. I love the questions, love to see them, and then we'll address them as we go along. So the first thing we want to look at, what is optioneering? Basic definition. To engineer an option, to consider in depth various options, and then advise as to the best option. Now, that's a dictionary type definition. What it actually is as engineers, architects, designers, whatever we might be, our job is to take a problem and solve it. A client needs something done. They need something designed. And we need to look at it into all of its bits and pieces. Sometimes it's a few factors, sometimes it's thousands of factors. And we need to take those, put them together into something, a design, and give our best idea back to the client. And that's basically what optioneering is, the function of going through all those different iterations. So if we think about this, let's just take a little example. We'll take Henry Ford. Most everybody in here probably drives a car or has. So one of the big things he's always said, if I asked people what they want, they would have said a faster horse, because the idea of a car was nowhere around. I mean, this is what they were used to, transportation. I don't think he ever imagined the car would become something like this, like it is today. Now, how does this relate to optioneering? A lot of the issues that we've had with optioneering has been the tool sets that we've had. Again, we've been able to take our knowledge as the best we can and apply these to designs, but it's our tool sets that have slowed us down, not so much us. So again, we're going to look at how do we not deliver the horse and buggy at a faster rate, but how do we deliver something completely different at a faster rate, at more accuracy, more ability to think outside of the box. So part of optioneering is sort of backed up with the technology. This is a huge buzzword. We see this everywhere we go nowadays. Optimize. And I don't know how many times I talk to designers that say, I optimize my project. I'm like, so how many times did you grade the site? How many times did you lay it out? And they'll be like 4 or 5 or 10. Now that is a level of optimization, but that's more of the human level. We're going to show today how I can do something, for example, a grading plan, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of times. And we're going to do it in a few minutes. And we're going to use optimization. Now, optimization is really just coming into the software industry part for the site design, for engineering. It's in a lot of other stuff like financial industry, banking, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, things like that. But we're now coming a little more in our way. And SITEOPS has been doing this for about a decade now. So, what is optimization? High level dictionary type definition, an act, process, or methodology of making something, such as a design, as fully perfect, functional, or effective as possible. So first off, let's get rid of perfect. If we made the perfect design, the reality is it's probably more expensive than the client's willing to deal with, right? Because everything ultimately goes back to making money. So that's what we want to look at. And that's what we're going to go through for the next little while, is how do we look at the function of a project, the effectiveness of it, and basically the cost based upon my design to deliver the client what they're looking for. So I titled this next slide, What We Want. And this is a 1960s picture. This is my father was an engineer, and when I would go visit in the mid to early 70s, this is exactly what it looked like. Mainline drafting tables, hundreds of them in a room, everybody doing their thing, working as hard as they could. So what they wanted back then was they wanted the ability to not have to redo this over and over and over. So back in the 60s, we started seeing CAD and computer-aided design starting to come around. But it wasn't until about 1982 that you saw things like AutoCAD. So in the 80s and the early 80s to the mid 80s, that's when you saw, for example, Autodesk, Bentley Systems, companies like this come around and create drafting tools on the PC. Now, they've all advanced through the years. They're all fantastic software, but to some level, a lot of the thinking's the same. It's all about 2D. Well, if we step forward in today's world, in the last few years, especially with BIM and everything going around, it's been more about delivering a model. And the model is an intelligent thing. So if we look at the architectural community, they've been dealing with models for a number of years now, and it really works well for them. For the site industry, we're just more getting into models here in the recent future, in the near future. But as we go forward, we have to be more and more involved with making models. Now, again, how does modeling a site tie in to optioneering? Because we're making a model, we have the ability to put intelligence in there. Things and items know exactly what they are, and if done correctly on the coding side of creating a software, they can be interactive, and they know how to react with each other as well. You know, it's not like the 1982, I draw a line, and if I want to create a parking space, I have to offset it 9 feet and then make a back line, offset it 18, fill it, trim it, extend it, whatever we had to do, and you have to do that space by space by space. And then eventually in the late 80s, 90s, we got array, and we got trim with fencing and all this kind of stuff. Well, now we're looking into the 2010s, going on to the 2020s, and we're looking at how we're going to advance the design community. Well, that is going to be done through optioneering. And I'm going to start in just a few moments showing you SITEOPS, and we're going to talk about how to create the models, the value of creating it, and how, again, we can go through things a lot faster, a lot easier, delivering better projects. So part of today's challenges that we have is we've got to meet some basic goals. First one is we've got to acquire some data. A lot of clients are looking to the service industry, the engineer, the architect, the surveyor, to acquire data. Sometimes it's simple as all they got is an address or a parcel number. Depending on where we're at in a project, I may just want to go out and get a boundary. Go out to GIS and grab some information. It may be a full-blown survey. I may want to go out and do droning. That's a really big one now. I want to drone a property, turn that into a 3D mesh that I can use, a reality mesh, and then be able to bring it, create a design from it, and then show my design inside that mesh that represents the area around a project. But what we're going to talk about today is the second one in there, applying experience. This has always been the harder part of our design flow. And it has not been necessarily our fault. I don't think it's been the designer's fault at all. I don't think it's really been anybody's fault. It's just been the advancement of technology. We're now in the point where if I think of it, I can create it very quickly. I remember when I had a company, one of the things I used to tell employees, for clients, if we can get within about 3 to 5% accuracy on cut and fill, cut versus fill, that was pretty much about as good as we're going to get, because like that thing previously, perfect, to go all the effort to go that extra mile usually took too much time, cost too much money for my company so that we could stay competitive. So a lot of times we didn't do it unless it just really, you could just see it. We didn't do that because, again, a lot of times we're making assumptions when we start a project. This is going to be a low point. I'm going to tie in here. This is the best thing to do. We have to make assumptions and then work backwards. So what we're going to see in a few minutes is we're not going to make assumptions. The software is going to look through those iterations for us to help find the best one for us to do. Because our ultimate goal, anytime we're doing a project, is we want to deliver what the client wants. We want to give them the best result, and a lot of that is based around cost as well, because if they can't afford to build it, It can be a pretty design, but that's about all it is pretty. And ultimately, we want to exceed clients' expectations because we want them to return. That's a big part of our business is repeat clientele. So again, if you're going out and doing a good service, making them happy, making their projects valuable, making them money, they're going to return over and over. So let's look at the power of optioneering. We're going to do this with SITEOPS. So we're just going to log into SITEOPS. It's a simple little SaaS model software. I'm just going to come in. We're just going to let some of this log in for me real quick. Here we go, and I'm going to log into one of my demo accounts. And one thing, if you need to do this in the chat area, do it. Sometimes when I get into this part, it gets graphic intensive. If it's going real slow on your end, just scream, and I'll try to slow down just a little bit. But we got about 15, 20 minutes, and I want to cover a lot of information if I can. At least try to do as much as we possibly can look at. So when creating or working with SITEOPS, again, this is a little bit different technology than we are used to. First thing you see is a difference in the interface. I mean, it still looks like drafting software, but we don't have a lot of stuff here. We don't need a lot of stuff. If we look at a parking lot, think about all the tools you use to create a parking lot: offset, trim, fillet, line, curve. It just goes on, right? We do a parking lot. There's a parking lot. I want a direction, and I want a different type of space points. That's it. What we're going to be able to do is allow optimization and automation to come together because we're going to build a model. Models are intelligent. But before we start building it, let's look at what we have on the screen. Now, inside this environment, we're able to bring in data from anywhere we want. We can bring our own data in. I can go out to geolocate. Looks similar to a Google Earth type environment. I can just say, this is the area I want to work with. I do select location. It comes down. It looks something about like what we have on the screen here. Then I can say I want USGS topo. I want an aerial image from Esri, or do I have something else? Bring in whatever you want. Because ultimately, what we're working with is a bigger area, but what we're really working with is a model. So if I come in and look at this, I'm now looking at a three-dimensional model of the site, which SITEOPS creates automatically for you. And we're going to build upon that model. And for the ones who created it and worked in 3D, it's a little hard sometimes. We're going to make it nice and easy. But again, it's about looking at options. It's about using your skill set to look at more than one or two designs, but to look at as many as you possibly can in a time period. Now, one thing I do hear a lot from users that do this is we bill by the hour. So if we tell a client it's going to take 20 hours to do a conceptual design, but in SITEOPS I can do it in 2, what do I do? Well, here's the beauty: is you go to the same client with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 designs, put a cost to each one, and let them decide. I've always said this: humans want options. That's just the way we are built. That's the reason when you go buy a car, there's like 2,000 options of things you can do on a car. You just don't buy a car. You spend more time figuring out what you do and don't want on it than probably the amount of time it took to pay for all the work it took to pay for it. It seems crazy, but that's the way we are. Your clients are the same way. They think they know what they want, and we want to give it to them, and we want to show them that's a good option, but they're also hiring us to come up with alternatives for better decisions. But sometimes it takes all the time we got in the budget just to deliver what they want. So we're going to start looking and learning how, by using optimization and optioneering, we can come in and do something different. So let's just go in, and I'm just going to start something really basic and show you what I mean by this, and then we'll advance into some other things. And I'll actually even show you how optioneering is not just going to let you do things faster, it also can make sure you don't have a bad design, which is a really cool thing. So let's go in and just do a quick little design of something. I'm going to do just a simple parking lot. This is about as basic as it gets. And in any design function, you have to know what you want. So SITEOPS is not going to replace your experience. If you don't know why you would put a parking lot in this part of the project and how it would deal with setbacks and how it would deal with the building and things like that, SITEOPS is not going to magically answer that question for you. You're going to have to still understand what it means to do land development, for example. Now, SITEOPS creates areas and objects. It's different than anything else, and this is what allows us to do the option to millions of iterations versus just a few. So on the right, we have requirements. And again, I can come in and I can set these however I want. There's a simple little project area with defaults. There's not very many of them. They're based on layout, grading, stormwater, and unit cost. Now you can always save these and just basically save them for client requirements, location, however you want to, and just import them in. So if I go back and this one's in Charlotte, if I go to, for example, Walmart has been on board with SITEOPS for years, and if I wanted to do something with them, I just go pick a Walmart template. It knows it has angle parking spaces and all kind of other requirements they ask for. You can set that up. But the thing is, I need to draw this actual design. So in the upper right-hand corner, this is what you don't get in any other software out there. I'm going to hit the layout software. I'm going to give it just a second. And we now have 319 parking spaces. And again, it goes back to options. The clients may not be happy with what we're doing. I can move this around. I can change it. I can get creative as I want or they want me to with very little effort. That Walmart parking lot that I talked about, 60-degree angled spaces. May I want to come back and do something a little different? Let's go in and use one of these direction path. Maybe I want to change it and do curved angle. So the creativity comes back down to us. What do we do as a design group? Again, think about drawing this. Anybody on here who's drawn a parking lot? This would be a nightmare. If we dropped a building in, let's do something simple. So, I want to get into some of these options. Let's do a 150 by 75. Just something simple. Let's move this. And as we move it, things change. We rotate it. So here's the beauty of it. I can have a design, again, depending on what we ultimately want in just a few moments. Or maybe the client says, I like this, but I want a little bit bigger building. So that means I'm going to have a little bit bigger parking lot. Again, so it's all down to what we want to build and design to make the client happy. And little things like I need a sidewalk on the front, and I can do it that way, or I can come in and draw my own stuff. So you can import designs and start creating them. So again, very simple and very easy. Now, one of the other powers, I want to show this real quick as well, is inside of a system like this, because everything's intelligent and we can set what it means, we can also create templates. Templates are a really cool way of coming in and not have to redo everything every time, especially if you got clients that do things the same. Let's say you do schools. We got a lot of people that do schools with SITEOPS. So if I come in and say, we want to do a little park or a school, I want to put in some ball fields. Let's just rotate these ball fields around a little bit, maybe make them fit the back part of the site better. We got a little sports complex or maybe a park that we have in the rear of the project. I want to bring in some soccer fields. Maybe this little office building again for a community park. So we can bring in a soccer field. And I'm going to show you what's important about some of these in just a second as to how we set them up. So we can come in and do this. So if I hit a grading button, because one thing every client wants to know is how much it costs. And the grading button is going to be the piece that is going to start giving us an idea of how this project is going to perform. Because we can see that it performs this way. So let's go in and let's hit the grading button. And this is where I'm going to give you a first little glimpse into what this technology is doing and thinking. So in the lower right-hand corner, it's going to be moving. Now on my end, it moves really fast. Through the internet, it moves just a little bit slower. Red is cut, blue is fill. Yellow means little to no elevation change. Again, depending on the color severity is, darker the blue, the more the cut, lighter the blue, the less the cut. But what SITEOPS is doing is it's going through it's probably going through about 10 to 20,000 grading plans right now. It's looking at what is the way to take all the parameters, all the unit cost, all the constraints, and say, what is the best design that comes up with the best cost? So if I come in, I'm going to turn on a few things just so you can see a little better. Turn on triangles. If you watch for a second, you'll actually see the contour lines moving. Again, we can actually see what it's thinking. And that's the beauty of this type of system. I can come in and start getting an idea of what's going on with the project. I want to add in a driveway. So as you can see, or what I'm trying to get you to see, is the more you can automate the drafting part, and just for the ones who are wondering about my design, I'm gonna break a little bit of the creek crossing rules that they have in this community just for the purpose of this demo. I'm gonna definitely break the 150-foot requirement. But again, just want to show real quick how we can do something as simple as a roadway. And roadways can be controlled the same as everything else. Everybody and this software knows how they play in the pool together. So if I go into a roadway, it looks something like this, and I can save it. I'm from the Charlotte region, so I want to put in a typical Charlotte roadway. Or maybe this is a collector, which has a different requirement. I can say apply. Then I want to tell my sidewalks to make sure they slope along with the road properly as well. And then I'm going to go to points, and we'll make sure we have, again, I can go individually to each one. I'm going to do this. This is a big generic point. Hit layout. There's my roadway. And then I could come in and do a parking lot, or let's just take the one we've done up front. I want to remove these. Let's bring this up a little more, and let's remove these returns because I'm tying into an existing cut. And then I just want to do a simple drive. Now, the one neat thing is as well, again, we're always constantly changing our designs, right? We're never really leaving it where it is. So if I change something like simple as moving a roadway, the other roads that attach will move with it, but I may come back and need to move it again. And we go back and grade, we can now start looking at what's going on in the project. Again, I've just now made about 8 or 9 major changes. Things that in a typical CAD tool would have taken till tomorrow. And I'm now grading the site. Looking at, we just added a couple $100,000 to this project because of the road cost, grading controls, different things like that. You can actually now see that I am grading in the project. I'm even grading in the roadway. My nice little M's, cross section, just like we like to see as engineers. It's thinking, again, as we have told it. What it's doing is it's going out, though, and optimizing where it can to try to save the most cost. And it goes perfectly, just like that. And again, this might be what I want. So let's go, I'm going to look at something else real quick. So let's go out to the project, and let's open up a different one. Because I want to show you some different levels of things you can do with this type of technology. Because when I talk about doing the millions of options, I think, it's, at least to me, and hopefully to you, it's pretty easy to see that I can now move things around real quick and easy, right? I can just, again, use my experience to create something. Similar to like we have a subdivision on the screen. We got a little mixed use. We got up front, this is probably more realistic what would have went out there. We got a little single family development. We got a main roadway that comes through, maybe future development to the north and south of the roadway. And we got some live work up toward the front, especially with the schools and other little retail areas that are around there. This is typically what would happen. But there's one thing you also need inside of when you're doing optioneering and doing these millions of iterations. Again, it's all about control. So you saw me play with the roadway just a little bit. So if I come in and we're going to look at this and turn on the contours, and there's a creek running right through this area right here. Now you can see, because I'm doing residential, I'm doing lot pads. We're grading it in just as we like. Okay. Here's a typical thing we run into in subdivisions. This is why I need those millions of options, why I need these tools to help do things better. I'm going to take that centerline roadway, and I'm going to pick on it. I'm going to go up to View, Profile. Now, in the profile, this is something that as users of technology like this one, you need to understand is there can be multiple levels. In this case, there's a level of cost based on the surface model, those 10s. When I had the wire mesh on, we're looking at the 10. It's moving everything based upon that to come up with the cheapest cost. But I would not design a road that looked like this, because that most likely is not going to meet my requirements, and it would, it's more like a roller coaster ride than a road. So there's another level. We want to do a best fit on this to come up with an alternative design that still, as close as possible, matches this one, because this one, again, remember, this is the cheapest cost of construction, but it's not one that can be met. So we're going to come in and let SITEOPS. I'm going to roll back out a little bit and just let you watch for a second. SITEOPS is actually moving the PVIs around, creating new ones, deleting ones. It's actually looking to say, hey, I got to meet those design requirements. How can I meet them, but yet still try to follow this the best, so that I'm doing cut and fill and coming up with a section that looks a little bit more realistic. So you can see that we now have a roadway, and I can move this, and if you do put it into a negative condition, it'll go red, so you know that I've now broken some rule. Looks like my K values are over 20, which is what we're at. And the beauty is I just say close. I've now went and quickly applied that to my new grading plan. So if we come back in, you're going to see definitely a lot more blue right in that lower area because we're filling it up. Now the other thing is I want to make sure that this road attaches along with it as well. So I'm going to come in, do the same thing, show profile, hit this. We'll just give it a 20 or a K value, say okay, give it just a second to come up with something new. So as we're going through and we're talking about, again, doing all these options more than 4 or 5, the more I can link things together, you'll see, for example, the little locks on each end. That means that this roadway links into that other master roadway multiple times. So as I change the major roadway, these will change with it. And then if I do the supplemental roads that attach to this one, so on and so forth, they all work together. So if we now come in, let's make a simple change. Let's take this road. We've submitted it, or we've talked to somebody, or we've ran some calcs for a creek crossing. This ain't going to get it done. Head depth ratios, whatever the requirement may be, I've got to raise this up a couple feet. And again, you can come over to the side and do things exactly. I'm just, for time, freehanding it. Close it, and let's grade. And now let's look at the grading. Again, we're getting ready to go through 20, 30,000 grading designs, looking for the cheapest cost. And I'm going to turn this over. I zoomed in. That looks a lot different. We went from a little over $100,000, 100.5 or so, to almost 2.3 million. Again, nothing wrong with this design. Nothing, what it comes down to is a client will never get mad at you for giving him the real honest numbers, because it is what it is. That's what I've had a lot of developers that told me, I don't mind that if I only got $1 million to spend, if it's $1.5 million, so be it. What I don't want to find out is we think it's $1 million, then I buy the property, we do the construction plans, then find out it's $1.5 million. That's the problem. And SITEOPS is here and using this technology and optioneering to look through those options to try to not run into those problems. That's what SITEOPS is going to do. Now, one thing I want to show you real quick is one thing I love about SITEOPS. You see the grading area is not feasible on the top. I'm going to open up a quick little design that we're going to actually show and talk about that. Other really great thing about technology like this is it can actually help identify any potential design issues. Because again, the old days of saying we'll solve it in the field for liability and other things, we don't like that. Company owners, developers, your clients, they don't want to hear we'll solve it in the field, because that usually means somebody's paying, and for a lot of our clients, that ultimately means they're paying. So I'm going to hit the layout solver. Now we got a nice little design, nothing fancy, office building, some upfront concrete, and some front and rear parking, and some roadways to get into that. So let's hit the grading button. We're going to let SITEOPS grade it up. And if we look at it, well, I'll be honest, nothing majorly, jumping out as a problem so far, right? This looks like we're sloping the parking lot, and we're sloping the back toward the wetland area creek that runs along the backside of the property. Most part looks pretty good. But let's go in and look at this grading area. So I'm going to turn off the contour layer. Now think about a software that can do this for you. What you think is good, because we made an assumption. The client wanted a building at a certain FFE for visibility. We have driveway requirements. We can't go into the wetland area. That's an absolute got to stay out of. So how do we deal with it? Well, SITEOPS is telling me, based on what everybody wants on this project, no matter what, you can't build it. We're missing by 1.5 feet. Now, what if the client in this one says, I don't want any walls? So we got to now go to the client. Sorry, how do we solve a problem of grading? We physically can't build what he's asking for. So what we do as designers is we start using our experience. Well, in this case, it's actually not that hard to figure out. We're going to come in and turn some of this off and on. If we look at the slopes, we can either have a wall in the back, or we can steepen the driveway. So let's try both of them. Let's take a look. So right now, even if I went in and said, hey, let's look at the budget for this, the cost estimate, it says about $883,000. Well, the problem is $883,000 don't work because the grading don't work. So now we're going to see what the change can be. So let's start with something simple. Let's go up to the center line of that roadway. Let's just say, for some reason, who knows why, again, we get this all the time as designers, they want maximum driveway entrance so it looks good and plays good with everything else around it. Let's just take it to 7%. We'll do something simple. Let SITEOPS find the best slope for that roadway. Let's hit layout, and let's grade it. So now if we come in and we look at grading, again, don't look a whole lot different. Still thinking pretty much the same way. We're down about $841,000. So for option So really the first option that was going to work is that. And we now see the grading error button goes away. But what if the client said, well, you know what, I have to have that driveway slope, because a lot of times our developers are selling to someone else who have requirements. So they said, all right, let me go in and see what it looks like if we do put a wall up. So let's go in, and here's how easy you can have SITEOPS determine a wall. Now, SITEOPS for a wall, let me go ahead and just put this out there for you. It is not going to just throw a wall up for the heck of it. It is going to throw it up because it is the cheapest option, and it is going to try to minimize that wall. Now, there's ways to go back in and force SITEOPS into having a wall if that's what you want, and making it the size you want. That you have all the control over. But typically, you know, again, that is most likely not the most optimized way of doing the project. This is how easy I can tell SITEOPS. Somewhere along the back of this property, I'm going to need to put a wall. So I'm going to take those limits of that wetland, and I'm just going to go over to the right and say, take the link height off. In other words, create a wall there. And I do want that in the cost of the project. Hit grading. And if we zoom in now, you're going to see that little tan area right there. That's a wall. And it's tapering up and down because, again, it doesn't need it out in the outer area. It can come in and grade. And you can see cut and fill. It looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 feet tall. So good. We don't even have to have a structural wall. But the difference is it went up to $902,000. So it's about an $60,000 difference between the two designs. So we've now been able to use optioneering to come up with different scenarios. But the other thing we can also do, again, this is why you want to deliver those options to clients. A lot of times when they're negotiating with people up front, and a developer is negotiating with someone to put this office building in, they have the ability, and those as soon as, let me phrase this, if they get the information up front enough, they have the ability to work in things such as the cost of that wall being built. If they don't, and they don't find this out for 2 months, they've already signed a deal, they don't have the ability to go back and get the wall cost back. It makes it very hard on them. So the clients want to know all the expenditures up front that we're looking at. And again, as a designer, if I was throwing this together conceptual, they gave me a couple of days to give them an idea, maybe a rough grading plan, I may have caught the wall, I may not have. But I wouldn't have known for sure how it affected it cost-wise. And that's ultimately what the client's looking for. How can we come in and look at the project? And I'll just hit this real quick just so you can get an idea. We can also look at utilities. It will look at a rational method, very basic. How are we going to look at stormwater for the project? And the other things you can do is send this off for optimization. And in optimization, it's going to run through millions of grading iterations to look for the best cost of construction based on sheet flowing parking lots and roadways and using less utilities and delivering things like that. You can do customization. Now, one other quick thing I love to show, and we'll end on this, is a lot of this is also not just using these options to create models for yourself, for your design process, and to deliver to the client 2D. We want to create 3D. So Bentley has a fantastic software called LumenRT, where you can actually just click a button. Because again, remember, I'm in a model. Let's go back to the 3D viewer. I'm actually just in a model. In this case, I haven't brought a building in yet. I can even do a little hardware render. We can see it as it looks. I can bring in trees and cars from LumenRT. We have all that stuff already in here for you. All you got to do is just open it up, start using it. But I can just hit the export button, and it'll turn something like this into something that looks more like this within just a few minutes. The only thing I've added inside of this is another tool. It's a very simple little visualization tool, extremely powerful though. So if we go in and look, I got lights, vehicles moving around. Those are the things I added in here just by a traffic path, just a few minutes. And the trees sway with the wind. People walk around. I can change the clouds. So in this case, I'm not just delivering a good design quickly. I'm also delivering a budget, a 3D visualization, quickly make a video. I can come in and give a live cube, which they could take and make their own little movements and their own little, let people play with it. And I love this part here. This is something, again, nighttime. Let it go in and start creating nighttime and take the lighting that I have from my project. You can see the cars in the distance. You can see where we have a little coffee shop. So we have lighting in this area, then some lighter type mood lighting around the outer edge. And you can deliver this to a client. Now imagine within a couple hours, being able to go from an address to a design, to a model, to grading, to budgets, to stormwater, to this. And this is all done through the idea of optioneering. That again, if I can look at ultimately as many things as possible in a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to deliver a good project every time. And that's ultimately what the clients are looking for. So I'm going to end this. We're going to get ready to go into questions. We're just a little bit over 30 minutes. And I want to challenge you. I tell everybody it is as easy as it looks. You just have to go out and try it. I get to meet people that says, wow, you've been using the software. Of course you make it look easy. It's easy. The hardest part of using SITEOPS is actually knowing how to design a project, not the software. So there is a free trial out there. We are ELS as well. We just released that. So if you're an ELS user inside the Bentley user base, you can go and get into SITEOPS. Go to Bentley Fulfillment for download an installer for a free trial. If you're not, go to bentleysystems.com. There's a product pick area, pick SITEOPS, and then in the lower right beside of our little picture, there's a get started, and it'll download an installer. All you got to do is just click on free trial, enter in some company information, and you'll be using it right then and there. You don't have to wait for anybody to get back to you. So again, just want to let you go out there, give it a shot, and tell us what you think, because I love feedback and I'd like to hear what you think SITEOPS does and how it fits into your workflow. So again, thank everyone. We're going to, before we jump into the Q&A, we're going to take a quick little poll, and then we'll jump right back in to finish some questions and answering.
Great, thank you, David. Before we begin Q&A, like David mentioned, we would like to ask the participants to take a short poll. We would like to know, based on today's presentation, would you be interested in having someone contact you to discuss your project needs or schedule a demo? Great, thank you for everyone's responses. And now back over to David and Katie.
So remember, we got the question area. Just start throwing them in there. We love talking about SITEOPS, and while we're here, we can even jump back in and possibly even show a few things.
Okay, David, we have a question. Can the unit cost be updated for the location of a project?
Most definitely. And we'd encourage that. Now, we give some unit costs, which are fairly standard, based on the material type or the earth movement or import or export, more from a U.S. national type number. You would definitely want to go in, or again, you don't have to, want to go in and change these. And again, it depends on how you deal with the client. We get a lot of users that just say, you know what, I'm not comfortable in the first couple of hours of a project or a couple of days of giving a budget. So what they'll do is, we have a lot of people that do this, that actually just use the costs that are in there and use them as a ratio. They'll go in and say, here's 5 designs. Number 1 is the cheapest, up to number 5 is the most expensive. And that way, the client can get an idea of one's 10% more than the other, one's 20%, and then tell the client, because again, I don't know if I'd go to numbers either if I'm just pulling USGS topo. But if a client can start getting an idea of what's the best design, then and they can see it starting to come to life, they're more willing to have us go out and get topo. Go out and maybe then I can, get phase 2 studies and wetlands and different things, get a better design, get maybe a contractor involved to get a better number. But again, we've now started down the path of doing the full project. And again, not just trying to decide. We're here to help you decide, and the client, what's the best thing to do.
Okay. What Architecture Cad programs is this program compatible with?
SITEOPS is what we call CAD agnostic. It has been from the very beginning, and so far we have no plans of changing it. So if you want to go, let's say, for example, you use Revit, you can import, we export an XML file, which a lot of Revit users like, or DWG. AECOSIM, we exported DGN, so you can go in that way. Civil 3Ds, the MicroStation, Geopack, En-ROADS, Open Roads, they import DGNs. So again, we're CAD agnostic. Now, one thing I will tell people is when you, for example, let's say I take a parking lot into Revit. I cannot change that parking lot, bring it back into SITEOPS and grade. Problem is when you go into another tool, you lose the intelligence. So the users will tend to do most of their conceptual design in SITEOPS, do the 4, 5, 6, get the one the client wants, take it out, and then unless there's a major change, don't come back in to tweak the project anymore. SITEOPS is done what it's there for. It's helped to figure out what's the best thing to do.
How does optioneering differ from my current workflow?
That's a good question. Optioneering is a little bit different because a lot of times in our current workflow, again, I can't speak for everyone, but at least for the ones I talk to and everybody else, their goal is to try to get the project done, to try to get the design done, and we always try to do the best for the client. I don't think anybody's out here to try to do a horrible job. If they do, they're probably not going to be an engineer or architect very long. But they're out here trying to do we're trying to do the best project we can, and again, we're limited by the software. They only allow us to do but so much. That's why there's been a call for this conceptual level type software and for modeling just to make it easier. So inside optioneering, we're going to look at things more. We're going to take scenarios that I may never have thought about, or let's put it this way, I may have thought about doing it, but I wouldn't have taken the time to do that. Let's say, for example, that one with the office building, I may have just went in and said, you know what, client says he don't want a wall. I'm just going to do the roadway, and we're not going to do the wall at all. Well, with SITEOPS, because again, it would have taken time to grade that version with a wall that the client may not have wanted. But come to find out, he may have went to his client who was selling to, and they said, you know what, wall's not a problem. I'm more worried about the 3% road. But if I didn't do the wall version, the client wouldn't have had that to try to sell, and the project may not be done at all. So part of the workflow again is thinking outside that box. And when you think outside the box, you'll be surprised at how many times a client says no, they don't want something, but when they put a cost to it, they're going, you know what, that wall ain't that bad of an idea. So again, it's just going out and taking advantage of your skill set and your experience more than we typically do.
Okay, thanks. How long does it take to learn SITEOPS and become a good user?
It's like any software. If I get in and do a couple projects, you'll be good to go. If you do one project a year, and you come back in the next year, of course, you're probably going to have to do a little work to get up to speed. Like I said, the hardest thing about SITEOPS is knowing where to put a parking lot, where to put a road, where to put the different pieces. The software is fairly intuitive. We've tried to keep it that way. Some of the grading, that's where your practice needs to come in because, again, like when I showed how to solve that problem, it's getting used to thinking a little bit different. We're thinking about not lines and curves. We're thinking about objects and areas, and we're really thinking about the 10. It's all ultimately about that surface model and how can we easily affect that.
Okay. What happens if I lose my internet connection?
If you lose the internet connection, the best part is when SITEOPS is running, it's actually running the majority of the software locally. So if you lose the internet connection for a short period of time, nothing at all will happen. Won't even know it. SITEOPS will in the background, but it has leeway time. So what happens is, let's say for some reason your internet connection is lost for a couple minutes and it comes back on, you'll see no effect. If it goes on for a little bit longer period of time, it'll actually pop up and let you know that it's lost internet connection and it wants to save. That way, when you get internet back, it can ping the license, reactivate the license, and go back to where you were at. But yeah, you won't lose anything. The only thing it's really using internet for is to make sure that the license is active. So again, everything else is being run on more of a local level once you download the data and get going that way.
Okay. That's all the questions for right now.
Perfect. I'll stay on for just a little bit longer if anybody wants to ask any more questions. But I do thank everyone for coming. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully everybody will get into optioneering and have fun playing with the new tool sets. Thanks, everyone.